Howdy, everyone. My name is Olabanji Soaga, and apologies for the little technical glitch. We wouldn't be starting today with our normal introductory music. For those of you who are just joining the show for the first time, my name is Olabanji Soaga, and I'm a Partner Solutions Architect here at AWS. I welcome you all to today's episode of Howdy Partner. Howdy Partner is a show that seeks to highlight some of the amazing work our partners here at AWS, uh, Amazon Partner Network, are doing. And before I move forward, I would like to introduce my co host, who I'm going to be working with today. And I have here Rupesh and Anthony. You guys can go ahead and introduce yourself to the listeners there.
Hi, I'm Rupesh Nara. I'm a technical program manager at AWS SaaS Factory. I've been with Amazon for over 3 years now.
Yeah, thank you very much for that introduction, Olabanji. My name is Anthony McClure. I'm a partner solutions architect as well. I'm also with the AWS SaaS Factory, just like Rupesh. Been with AWS for almost 3 years as well. Great to be here.
Thank you very much. And today we have with us Metal Toad, one of our pioneers in the Gen AI field. For those of you enthusiasts of generative AI, today is your day. They'll be talking to us about some of their amazing solution. And today I have here Joaquin and Nathan. You guys go ahead and
Hey, everybody.
introduce yourself.
So I'll introduce myself. I'll go ahead and start. I'm Joaquin Lippincott, CEO of Metal Toad, and I'm joined here by our VP of Engineering, Nathan Wilkerson.
Well, Nathan Wilkerson, VP of Engineering, as Joaquin said. I've been with Metal Toad for 11 years now.
That's a really long time. Yes, a very long time. So, without any further ado, let's get into today's business. So, can you guys tell us and the audience as well about Metal Toad, why you're here today, and what we are going to be learning?
Sure. I think sort of the general piece. Happy to talk about the background, sort of what qualifies us to speak about technology. We've been in business for 21 years. My daughter is going to be 22 this year, and I quit my day job when she was 1 year old. So that's how I always frame it. But we'll talk a little bit about the background, and then we'll dive into kind of the ins and outs of generative AI, some of the differences between machine learning, both from an academic perspective, but more importantly from an applied perspective. And I feel a little silly because generative AI, it's like everybody's talking about it, and I want to disclose that I am both bullish about it in terms of the implementation, but also very cautious because I think in some aspects there is a bubble that is coming, in particular with how investment and Wall Street is happening on that. But I'll tease that, and that will be sort of the backdrop of what we'll eventually get to. But we'll go through all of that.
Yeah, if I could also just interject something really quickly here too. Just want to say that Metal Toad and us at the AWS SaaS Factory, we work together very closely. In fact, Metal Toad is one of our esteemed SaaS competency partners. And so we're, of course, very proud to be here in support of our competency partners. And, we're talking about generative AI today, but Metal Toad is absolutely fantastic and subject matter experts in all areas related to software as a service. So certainly we're happy to be here and in support of them as well.
And that the experience has been fantastic for the SaaS competency. We have a number of competencies, and the experience both working with the SaaS Factory team, but then also the SaaS competency team has been amazing. I feel like, I'm not just the Hair Club president, but I'm also a client. So I'm happy also to announce that our first product, our first real product, it's a foray actually in security and artificial intelligence, just launched today. And that was total coincidence. But Securitoad, we're sort of keeping with the Toad theme, is now live in the marketplace. And that was a big part of the learning, both in the marketplace and what the whole SaaS deployment process is like. And AWS is an incredibly rich arena And so also as a consulting partner, we're excited to help to, other SaaS companies that are looking to deploy in or integrate more fully into the AWS ecosystem, and just helping them with some of the wayfinding that's been done. And you will probably talk about that a little bit more in detail. Nathan really was the person doing a lot of the yeoman's work in terms of getting that across the finish line, in terms of the marketplace, and then also the competency itself. So if there are ever questions from the audience in terms of how do you get the competency, what are the benefits of it, what are the complexity, what are some tips, hopefully he can share some of the secrets that we've uncovered along the way.
I hope at some point we're going to be diving a little deep into Secure Toad. But before we go there, I have a starter question. Tell us about how Metal Toad got started and what your experience and journey in the partner network has been.
Great. Yeah, no, I'm happy to. So we got started, as I mentioned, 21 years ago. And I got started obviously earlier in my career, before the year 2000. And so I started back when getting into the tech industry meant you basically needed to be able to spell HTML, right? And if you couldn't spell it, they would work with you on it, because it was just like nobody wanted to do the web. It was sort of early days, but worked at a couple places. I started, actually, my background was as an art major. I moved into design, so I graduated with a degree in design. But as a part of that, I worked with some really fantastic designers. And so I really liked the building early days. And so I got into that as sort of a, hey, you design it. This is beautiful. Why don't I build it for you within that web ecosystem? And so when I quit my day job, I had worked as a front-end developer, back-end developer, UX designer was sort of the last place. And I quit my day job to start an e-commerce business. But I was making more money on the side doing consulting with my previous employer, who had said like, hey, would you just stick around to do some of these things, on the UX side? And so 6 months after, supposedly I threw in the towel on that, that was actually the major source of my income. And so I shuttered that, and that became Metal Toad, ran full time. So it was early days. It was 2003 because my daughter was born in 2002. And so back then it was really about open source and Flash. And I even cut my teeth, before Metal Toad, on business card CDs. Remember when that was going to be the future? Those Shockwave, those little tiny things. I think a certain portion of the audience that's too young is going to be like, what are you talking about? But look it up, business card CDs. One of these days it's going to come back. Not really, but in any case, I did a lot of that development, ended up doing some work in the open source space, in particular around PHP. And then as the industry really grew and the open source projects matured, we ended up attaching ourselves to Drupal, which was a content management system. And that was a big part of our growth trajectory, being just associated with this open source system. We did work for Sony Pictures. We did work for the Emmys, DC Comics, ABC, Sony Credit Card Rewards, Wheel of Fortune. Nathan, what are some of the other Drupal customers that we've had over these? Hub Networks, Hub TV.
Hub Network we did. None of the big ones. UNFI we've worked with. We've worked with what's the big Drupal ones? There's a lot of non-Drupal ones I'm thinking of now. NBC, I think we did something with Drupal with them.
Yeah, and UNFI actually, interestingly, was acquired, I believe, by Amazon. They were a wholesale distributor of organic food. One of our engineers at the time, when we were working on that project, had interfaced with them because he was part of a co-op. And it's like, if you want to buy a 50-pound bag of organic beans, they're like the only game in the United States. And so he had become familiar. But there was a whole bunch of stuff that we did with that. And then when we saw that sort of, I called the writing on the wall maybe a little bit early, but we were a big part of the Drupal community. But we decided to veer away from that. We ended up doing some work in the HTML5 arena, which was very new. We built a Netflix competitor for Technicolor, which became Fandango now. We did a lot of we did some wearable stuff for Intel. We did some mobile first stuff also for Intel in terms of the Liverpool Football Club, sort of a partnership of what's the ideal kind of second screen experience there. And so that was a whole really interesting trajectory. We worked with the first generation Samsung Smart TV and the first generation Samsung tablet. And we were going to do, this was for that Netflix competitor. And so we were trying to figure out how many frames of animation you were going to get. And it turned out with the Smart TV, the first generation, it was one per second. So we're like, okay, we're not going to do animation. It's going to appear and it's going to disappear. That was it. But that was a whole interesting thing. And then the smart watch also on the Intel side was fascinating. We did some work with Warn winches. If there are any off-road people, they're sort of the premier winches. We actually did the Bluetooth interface and mobile application for their first Bluetooth enabled winch. So you could, wrap something around a tree and push a button from a safe distance and not have to worry about that hook coming back to, kill you if you're standing in the wrong spot or too close. And so HTML5, though, was interesting because Steve Jobs really closed the door on that being a viable option, right? Because he was like, nope, you know what? We're going to close the door. And it was native that people were going to have to go down if they wanted to get into either the Android or the Apple ecosystem. Then in 2000, so we're getting to AWS. Sorry, it's been a long time, 20 years. So our first deployment in AWS was actually, if you can believe it, it was for the Emmys primetime show. We had rebuilt their website back in 2009 at Emmys.com, and then they had hired a design firm to come in and essentially do a redesign of the Drupal website. And they gave it to us 2 weeks before showtime, like 2 weeks before the actual televised event. At the time, we actually had a physical colo with like 5 servers racked and stacked in there. We took a look at the performance and we're like, you need 5 times the number of servers in 2 weeks. And we were like, that's not going to happen. And one of our DevOps engineers, and Nathan, maybe you can talk about this. I think it was Tyler Ward was like, you know what? We've got all this stuff in automation. I think it was, you'll be able to talk through it, but it was a Hail Mary. And we landed it in AWS and it worked beautifully with no downtime. Nathan, I don't know if you want to speak about that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was Tyler or Dylan, but one of them were like, hey, we heard of this Amazon thing. Let's give it a try. It's our only shot. And so they turned on a bunch of servers. I think it was the Thursday before the event.
Yeah.
We did another quick load test Friday morning, and then we cut them over to the Amazon environment, kind of crossed our fingers, and it ran beautifully. And ever since then, we're like, yeah, we're never going to rack another server if we can avoid it. So
yeah. It took a while for us to get Sony Pictures Television. They went kicking and screaming into the cloud, but we got them there. We also end up migrating Sony credit card rewards out of an IBM colo much later, which interestingly was sort of like tied to the hip with Wheel of Fortune. Go figure. Strange Bedfellows. Fantastic people in both of those places, but. So that was in 2014 when we landed that there, but it really wasn't. And I had been saying the cloud would be great someday, and like that day was that day for us. When we landed the Emmys there in 2014 and had no downtime. Then in 2019 we were wrapping up an engagement for Daimler Trucks. They came to us and they were like, "Hey, we invented smart trucks. What do we do with all this data?" And we're like, okay, there's nothing off the shelf for that. So we'll build fleet management software for you on that. We worked with an amazing design team out in Portland, Oregon, Ziba Design, and the whole crew there was fantastic. And that was about a 3-year engagement. And when that was wrapping up, I hadn't programmed for like 7 years. And so I wanted to get something set up and running. So I needed to get a dev environment set up on my laptop. And I went through the process of actually getting that set up. And this was 2019. And by the time it was all set up, I realized I had installed nothing on my local machine. And that's when it hit me. I was like, oh, okay. This is not just, it's not just compute cycles and storage. It's like, this is everything. This is where this is going. And so that in 2019 was when we really branded and went all in on AWS consulting. We said, look, we're an AWS consulting partner. And since then, we haven't looked back.
Thank you very much for that. And let's dive deep into a topic that I know you are very passionate about, and that is about machine learning and generative AI, like you started earlier. Tell us more about what Metal Toad is doing in that field.
Sure. So it's kind of interesting because we've been, when we went all in on AWS, for about 3 years, we were really focused on the entertainment industry. And so we did, some large consultative engagements with Fox about, streaming and all their direct to consumer stuff. So all of the fast channel stuff, all of that was built up on native AWS infrastructure. We did some interesting things with visual machine learning for Siemens Wind Power out in Denmark, which I can get into. But we started to see that one in the entertainment business sort of cycles through. They're like, outsource everything or bring it all in house. And so they were sort of in a period where they were like, what are we doing spending so much money? We're going to bring this all in house. And so we were looking at that. And what happens is they do that for about 5 years and then they're like, nothing's getting done. Let's outsource everything and get it done. But I've been through that cycle enough to see what that was. And so we said, why don't we look at a different arena in terms of partnership with AWS? And I, at the time, really thought that small to medium-sized business was kind of an under-tapped area. I think that, the power of the cloud really does democratize, all of this, what is kind of associated with enterprise level engagements, serverless applications, like all of these things, but does it in a way that really can be accessed by small to medium-sized business. So we said, okay, we're going to focus there. We have a lot of history with the Pacific Northwest. Happens to also be where AWS is headquartered. So we said, okay, we're going to focus on the Pacific Northwest. But when we started our go-to-market motion, you can't go to an AWS sales rep and say, hey, we specialize in AWS. They're like, yeah, so does everybody else who I talk to. And so I said, okay, well, I talked to the team and I said, what's interesting to you? And across the board, people were really interested in machine learning. And so there was a new competency that was coming out. So we got the AWS machine learning competency. We actually hired back somebody who had been a previous intern at Metal Toad, who for a while was our SME. He had gone on to get his degree in robotics and was doing an education on machine learning. And so we focused on machine learning. And then as things evolve super rapidly, you don't say machine learning anymore. You just sort of say artificial intelligence because, from an academic standpoint, in 2024, everybody was like, okay, well, ChatGPT is revolutionizing everything. It's on the tip of everybody's tongue. And so we were in this interesting place where we were already pretty far down that rabbit hole. And I can go through and I can talk through some of the specific examples of like what works and what doesn't work. Within some of those contexts. But, academically speaking as a frame, I wish I had a Venn diagram, but I'll draw one. So it's like all of this is artificial intelligence, right? And then when in that you have machine learning. And so within machine learning, you have a category called deep learning, which most people skip over. And within deep learning, you have large language models or generative AI. But what the market has said, no matter what academia says, they've like, no, that's what I meant. I meant a robot that I can talk to and sounds like a person. So for everybody that's out in the space right now, trying to go back in and say, well, really, it's a broader umbrella of artificial intelligence and not everything works with large language models and all of that. It's just like, yeah, okay, it's all AI. So we've been all in for, I think it's probably been like 2.5 years, which seems like a short period of time, but within the context of this arena, it's kind of a lifetime and enough for us to see some seismic changes. Nathan, I don't know what you want to say. I'd love to hear you talk about like that competency and some of your experience in terms of that evolution from a technical standpoint.
Yeah, so when we started looking at it, we had first looked at what people were interested in, but also what we had experience with. Mm-hmm. And up until that point, we had worked with Daimler, we'd work with another trucking company and other companies that were doing ML, but we were building the data pipelines. We did everything but the ML at that point. And so we decided pivoting to ML wouldn't be as big of a lift as pivoting to something else. And so working with it, we went through the requirements. We needed case studies. We started going through our previous workloads, and we actually had case studies. We didn't even consider machine learning because we were using Amazon machine learning without knowing it, text recognition and stuff. So once we had that, we went through, and actually that's where SecureToad came from. We're like, well, we need more machine learning test cases that aren't just these easy products. Where do we have data we can start testing with? And we had lots of logs, which is where SecureToad came with. We've used it in numerous SaaS applications since then, including our products, one called RPG Match, which is a matching site for tabletop role-playing games. And these are the things that we've been building on top of to refine our expertise in it as we continue the journey through machine learning.
Yeah, and kind of going around the room, because I know we've talked about it. Anthony and Rupesh, you guys have definitely had some exposure. I'm not sure if it's just as technologists, if you guys have also gotten your ML certification with AWS.
Yeah, absolutely. I can certainly speak to that. I as well. I'm a certified machine learning through AWS, and it's always an interesting conversation that we have regarding AI ML, especially right now, right? Because everybody's talking about generative AI, and I think maybe this is where you're going a little bit, Joaquin. But we've had the conversation amongst us that although generative AI is an amazing new technology, has great benefits for our customers, we see the huge upside potential of it. It's not the end all be all, right? The generative AI has its place, has its important use cases that it can solve and work well with. But in many cases, there are other areas of machine learning and artificial intelligence that may be a better fit for a customer, right? I think, Nathan, we're just talking about TextRact and some of these other types of AI ML capabilities or services that AWS has that may be more targeted and focused for what a customer is looking for. But above and beyond that, there are just certain things in generative AI and large language models that just don't fit well together, right? So if you're trying to do real numerically complex computation regarding predictive analytics, for instance, that's not generally an area of generative AI, maybe something more specific with machine learning. But even above and beyond that, machine learning is such a nebulous and large topic to get into and working with customers. One of the first questions that we always ask is, well, is machine learning really even the correct solution for what you're trying to do? Is there any way that you can solve the business problem that you're trying to address without using AI ML capabilities?
Right.
Because it's always generally going to be cheaper and ultimately easier to implement. But have you run across that that same philosophy as well, Joaquin and Nathan?
Oh yeah. So Nathan has his ML cert. I have done all of the training and never actually took the certification, but I remember in machine learning training, in machine learning training, the first rule of machine learning is don't use machine learning. It's sort of like the Fight Club rule. And it is, I could give you some good examples of like a concrete place where ML was not the answer and Gen AI was the answer, and then a reverse, right? Someplace where you actually do need to do the heavy lifting. So we had a customer, Genius Vets, which does they do marketing for veterinary practices, and so they have hundreds, maybe thousands of veterinary clients that have these local practices, and what they do is they do search engine optimization and marketing to help direct traffic in. And one of the things that they also do is they record the incoming calls. So somebody calls, they say, "Oh, my dog's sick. What do I do?" They're recording that front desk call, hold music and all, and then they are storing all that information. And so they had 300,000 hours of calls, and they came to us and they said, "Look, what we've discovered is that we can send as much traffic as we can to this veterinary practice. But if the person at the front desk is mean, or if the person at the front desk doesn't try to book appointments, it's not going to do anything." And so they had a bunch of frustrated clients saying like, "Why am I paying you?" And they're going like, "Because we're sending a ton of people your way," but they weren't converting. And so they said, "Can we use machine learning, deep learning, machine learning to actually do some of this?" And I think this was like 2021, I want to say. But it was pretty early on. And so we were looking at that. And so the first thing we did was sentiment analysis, one of the deep learning algorithms you can get, off the shelf with AWS, because being a small business, cost is important, right? And so we did that analysis, and it wasn't great because within that context of, a veterinary practice, you hear sick, dead, vomit, and those are bad if you're a sentiment analysis robot. But if you're a veterinarian, that's what you hear every day. And so that was not quite landing. And then the other thing they wanted to do was, did they make an appointment? And we said, okay, well, what you need to do is figure out how to get that ground truth of, within this context of this 300,000 hours, you're going to have a human or contract humans to go through and say yes, no, to build that ground truth. And even then we were sort of struggling because, our ML SMEs were like still kind of a small data set, right? Even at 300,000 hours. And so I think it was that same engineer. So David is who I'm thinking of, who's our ML SME, was like, well, why don't we hook up, a large language model? And we were like, sure, let's do it. And so we did. It was, I think, almost trivial. Nathan can speak more through the mechanics, but it was very accurate in terms of the yes, no on the appointment and all of these things. It was like, well, let's see. And it worked. And so that's, first rule of machine learning is don't use machine learning. The first rule of generative AI is give it a try. That's my own invention. So please feel free to run with it. But Nathan, was it more
trademarked?
Right. TM Metal Toad.
No, it was actually just as simple as you said. We would spend a lot of time on this. It was a small business. We didn't have a huge budget. I wanted to kind of time box it. So they pitched me on it, and I'm like, okay, but I don't want to spend a week on this. Do it Friday. You have Friday afternoon. See what you can get. They started working about noon. By 4 o'clock, like, hey, look what we got. And they've sent JSON with all their questions answered, summaries of the call. I'm like, it's done. And I'm like, no way. And they're showing me this, how this works, how easy it was, how the plugin was. It's literally an API call with prompts. And it was an amazing progress on something we've been working on for probably about a year and a half at that point.
And that actually taps into the power in terms of the position of where SaaS actually is to democratize this stuff. Because I'm a big believer that, a lot of people just aren't going to adopt generative AI. People aren't going to sign up for ChatGPT. They're like, nah, wake me up when it's over. This is a flash in the pan. But the companies that then go in and don't just say, let's educate our team on it, but they say, what can we hook up programmatically to use some of these large language models to solve problems that otherwise would require cost prohibitive amounts of code or big data analysis and training on to create the ground truth. It's like, we can do that. And the only place other than those, you can do that on an individual business, which is fantastic. We'd love to unlock that. And what we also can say is that AWS wants to pay you to try this out. They will pay 10% of whatever the planned ARR is. If you work with a consulting partner like Metal Toad, literally AWS will write a check for you to try out these services. But the only company that's actually better positioned than these small businesses that can tap into this really are SaaS providers that can fully integrate these things into SaaS, so that even the people who don't want to adopt generative AI, they will, just because the SaaS applications that they use every day are actually bringing it to them.
Speaking of SaaS, Joaquin, we mentioned, of course, that you have your machine learning, the machine learning competency.
Mm-hmm.
But did you get your machine learning competency before you went after your SaaS competency? Which one came first? And do you have any others as well?
Yeah, so we have the digital customer experience. We have the machine learning, which came before. We have a number of service deliveries, Lambda. We probably have a dozen service deliveries, which are sort of the mini competencies. And then SaaS came afterwards, and it came from an invitation because we were building Securitoad, and we worked with the SaaS factory team, who's fantastic. And the SaaS factory team, as you know, works with the SaaS competency team. And so it was sort of a, hey, you guys have really taken this seriously.
The
You've done
natural progression.
Yeah. Why don't you look at this competency so you can now help other companies that are looking to do this type of work and more fully integrate into the AWS stack. So that came after, and now we're on the cusp of the generative AI competency from AWS, which was, I think it just came out like 4 weeks ago. Is that right, Nathan?
Yeah, very easy.
It was very recent.
Yeah.
Well, and so we're working through the paperwork right now, hopefully to have that filed in the next couple of weeks. But it's been
fantastic.
It's a great process.
Yeah, and from the SaaS Factory's perspective too, Joaquin, going back to Metal Toad's history, it's kind of funny, and I'm sure you've probably seen this, that myself and a couple of our others, we were running around in the same space back then, working in Flash and Flex, and kind of doing the rich internet applications. So yeah, there's about 4 of us, I think, at the SaaS Factory now, that we were all kind of doing the same thing back there. But the circle always comes fully around, and it's, we love having you, and you've been a fantastic addition. SaaS Factory, of course, working with you has been brilliant, and as a competency partner, you guys are knocking it out of the park. So it's always great to see. And with all the competencies that you have, I hope our audience can see that Metal Toad is a brilliant partner to work with, almost no matter how you're coming at things as far as AWS is concerned. Specifically from the Gen AI side, which you're kind of focused in on here, but you really run the gamut in anything related to SaaS.
Well, thank you, Anthony. You're making me blush. And I'm actually curious. I have a question about the SaaS clients that you have. For SecureToad, we've sort of settled on, I think, Next.js. Nathan, is that right? The stack that we're sort of underpinning the front end with?
It's still React. We're looking at Next.js for most of our future projects right now.
Yeah, where are most SaaS customers these days on the AWS stack? Because that's one of those things, you get all those microservices, those delicious microservices underneath the hood, but what are people building with on top of that?
Yeah, sure. I think I'll let Rupesh weigh in here, especially because he really focuses on the solution side of the house. But just in general, from customers that I've had direct interaction with, it's really all over the place, right? I mean, we certainly have customers, especially that are coming in maybe from the greenfield side of things, from the startup side of things, that are very heavily invested or thinking about moving down the serverless pathway. That's a very appealing thing to younger organizations that are just starting up and coming into AWS, maybe don't even have anything built, right? Yeah. And then we have another very large segment, I would say probably the largest segment of our customer base, that is already coming with something, right? There's some sort of migration that is either taking, could be. I'm sorry, I'm back. Yeah, my internet was a little sketchy there. But those larger companies coming with something, so there's some sort of migration that's taking place with those companies.
Yeah.
And in those cases, we see that containers oftentimes ends up being the way that our customers end up going. And ultimately, from the front end side of things, we've touched a couple of them. Certainly, I think React and Angular are still the 2 biggest front end technologies that we see the most of, but
I remember Angular. It was the hotness for a while there. Things move fast though.
They do, especially in the JavaScript world. I can't keep up. I was not a front end guy. I was never a front end guy, and I was kind of glad for that. But yeah, ultimately, it's tough to keep up in the JavaScript and the front end world. But yeah, it's certainly all over the place. But yeah, Rupesh, I know with our reference architectures and SBT now, we kind of focus there for a reason, right?
Yeah, it's mostly like you mentioned, Anthony, it's all over the place, right? Like going from startups to large enterprises, they all use like different tech stacks. And startups especially tend to lean in with like the new technologies, like the new and greatest technologies. And the enterprises are like some of the matured organizations might still have some tech stack and the expertise that they already have in-house. So they tend to go with some of the, I wouldn't call legacy, because I don't think either Angular or React is legacy at this point, but
I hope not.
I hope not. I think it's the same case with the ML as well, right? Like with the whole landscape changing with generative AI.
Yeah.
We might even have to call machine learning as traditional machine learning at this point, because
It's so funny you mentioned that, because I feel like, AWS is obviously responding to the market, but they were, it was like, oh, nice machine learning certification. Can you just cross off all of the machine learning and just like call it generative AI or AI? I mean, it's true that we're actually going through and we're getting the other competency. And that case study of what you see with Genius Vets is a perfect example of like, it's not just a buzzword. These things are substantively different. I can give you an example, if you're curious, though, of something that can really only be solved with machine learning rather than a large language model and sort of that talking back and forth.
I think it's good to call out the distinction, actually.
Yeah.
I'm interested to hear what you've seen in the field.
Yeah, it also really depends on what kind of problem you're actually solving, right? Like generative
Exactly.
AI may not be the right choice for all the problems. You might still have to go with machine learning and the other tech stacks that you have. Maybe not even machine learning, right? Like with regular programming too, you can solve a lot of challenges. So it all depends on what is the best fit for the business challenge that you're solving. And also you have to look at the costs, right? You can't just throw a large language model onto everything and assume that it costs the same thing as like writing it in like as a microservice.
Yeah. Well, a perfect example was a customer that came to us. Alert California, and what they do is they actually monitor for fires in California. So they have all of these cameras set up everywhere, just looking for smoke and looking for fire. And one of the things that they were running into was like, they were like, okay, that's a false positive. That's a sunset. That's not a fire, and smoke looks different than it does at night versus the day. And so that's one of those things you could give it to Bedrock. It's just that it's not going to be able to do it. Chat GPT, Grok, all of these systems are going to have no idea what it is. And I think really that visual as a test is maybe one of those key things. Although, these things are being updated all the time, but when you have a very specialized service, I think that's a case where you kind of can't get away from that big machine learning, But again, like, there's so much you can do with these platforms, these large language models. I often say peak Gen AI is not writing essays for high schoolers. That's not, we haven't topped out yet.
Totally. And speaking of Bedrock, Joaquin, do you have like any case study where you actually implemented LLMs? You leveraged any of the LLMs using Bedrock, and how easy is it to like switch from one model to other? And were you able to see like significant cost difference by changing models or anything like that? Like, do you have anything from the field that you can share with our audience today?
I see Nathan unmuting, and he is definitely the one to answer that question.
Yeah, we've actually done several. One of our biggest things right now is we do POCs for customers wanting to try it out because it is so hot and new. They don't know exactly how it works or how to use it. And we'll go in and we'll build out Jupyter notebooks, really traditional in the machine learning space, and test out prompts, get a good prompt that's working. And then we change one line of code to point to a different model in Bedrock. It's literally just the model name. And by changing that, we're testing a new model. And we can get really fast data and really fast iteration on Bedrock because we can test so many models so quickly. I don't have to worry about looking up another library or another API call. It's just that one line to tell you the different one.
Yeah, that's a fantastic example. Yeah, that's a really great example of how Bedrock especially can be so useful in doing those kind of prototyping things. But something else kind of jumped into my head as we were talking about this and generative AI and machine learning in general, but especially with the speed at which things are changing. Because everybody's kind of
sure, it's good.
Yeah,
you broke up.
Yeah, sorry about that. Because we're all kind of learning this generative AI stuff together at the same time, right? I know some customers have said, well, we can kind of go this our own way. We can dig in here. We can, we can play with the tools. We can play with the large language models. We have all this available to us. But we always recommend, at least me specifically, customer, that we should get a partner involved, right? The partners can really help our customers to accelerate their journey, to end up saving money in the long run, right, by investing in that relationship. But is that something that you're running into as well? Has it been a process of trying to convince customers that, hey, you should work with us and let us help you to get there faster, or has it been kind of smooth sailing up to this point just because of the newness of everything?
Well, I think that one of the things, like, because you're dealing with a lot of SaaS companies, like anytime you're talking to a programmer about technology, they're like, "I'll do it myself." It's like trying to talk to a carpenter about, hey, you really should hire somebody to do the plumbing. They're like, "Nah, I got this." I think that one of the things that is a real concrete deliverable that you only get working with a consulting partner is the POC funding. So a proof of concept funding. So Nathan alluded to that, but you can say, if you're working with a consulting partner, that consulting partner can size what your annual recurring revenue would be, predictive, right? You don't have to spend it. There's no commitment. And then you essentially, AWS will say, if you fill out some paperwork, the consulting partner takes care of it, but all you have to do is sign off, and you get 10% of that annual recurring revenue as a check to do the POC. And in some cases, that can cover the full cost of the proof of concept. So if you have a workload that maybe at the end of the day would spend $100,000 a year, that's $10,000 that you don't have to pay for. I call it affectionately Bezos bucks. I know it's, we should switch it up now that we have a different CEO, but that's fantastic. And that's a value that you only get from a consulting partner. So even if somebody were doing it in-house, they're going to have to pay for, those costs internally. And it's often, honestly, the wrong approach, because people that are working in-house, like, unless they were hired to do generative AI, if it's just an add-on to an otherwise already busy schedule, it can be very difficult. But whenever we work with technologists, we always really try to be very, very collaborative and not a black box. I think that's one of the approaches, that is kind of unique to Metaltoad. We're not like, okay, walk away, we've got this. We really want people to understand what's being built, the decisions that are being made. And for technologists, it can be really nice to be able to ride along there. I don't know, Nathan, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I was going to say, overall, in the sales calls I've been on, most people are super interested. They're really wanting to collaborate with the partner. The resistance we've had is basically their ability to resell the new solution. And so could they pay off the development costs on their SaaS product by either an add-on feature or something else? But if you're not looking at it, I'd say look at a partner, not just for the POC funding, but because we can accelerate it. We're experts at this thing. We can do it. And whether that's us building it and handing it over to you, or whether that's us side by side, we're working with a client right now. We are literally in scrums with them every day. We're on pairing sessions, and we're going through the process together so that when we're done, they're ready to do it. They're ready to maintain it. They're becoming experts at it at the same time.
And that's an important aspect too to call out. If for those that maybe not familiar with how we operate at AWS, so solutions architects like myself, like Olabanji, we can work directly with customers, and we love to do so. But we act as trusted advisors, right? Our job is to really help to assist with architectural decisions, planning out services, how those services are implemented. We can give a lot of advice. One thing that we can't do, though, is to go hands-on keyboard with our customers, right? We are not allowed to actually build out solutions, but our AWS partners, our competency partners specifically, are, right? So that element of what you can provide to your customer base is above and beyond what we could do. So even if you could have myself or Rupesh or Olabanji in your pocket, right, and you're doing this yourself, and you can just pull us out when you need to ask us a question. Even if you had that all the time, which of course we don't, you're still not getting the full experience of what you could have with a partner. And I'm really thinking specifically around the areas where issues comes up. Right. That's the tricky things. When things are working the way that they're supposed to, or that you believe that they're supposed to work, those are the easy days. The tough days are the ones when you spend hours and hours and hours trying to solve solutions and problems. And for partners such as yourself, you have direct communication capability with us in AWS, and you can help to facilitate fixing those things. You had mentioned an issue that had come up with a service, I think it was TextTract, right? Something related to legal that kind of fell down this rabbit hole.
Yeah, we were doing some document processing for a client, and all we were looking for was the contract code. They want the contract code so they can just attach the image to the code in their database. And so without context, TextTract's finding the contract code great. It's always in the same spot. It's perfect. The problem came up when zeros and O's were getting confused occasionally. Since there's no context like a word around it, it doesn't know what goes there. And so it's making guesses, and it's frequently wrong. And we identify that relatively quickly, like, oh, here's a font. There's a slash through it. We'll try that out. It got better. But TextTract's really good at bad images. So if you have smudges or imperfections, it'll filter it out. And it was seeing that slash as an
artifact of the letter is imperfection. Yeah,
exactly. So we reached out to our solutions architect and their solutions architect, and they were able to do a lot of research for us and help facilitate it. And we eventually got to the solution where we chose a different font where the O's are really, really big and wide, and the zeros are very, very narrow. And that got the success rating from like 70%, well over 90%. And so,
yeah, shout out to Andrea, our solutions architect on the AWS side. And what I will say, don't tell anybody, but we are actually radically customer focused as well. And so when we saw that there was this issue, we were like, well, let's see if we can push it through. It was like, let's hook up Google. And they probably have the OCR right. But this is where it gets interesting. They had the same bug. And so it's what's fascinating, and this actually leads into the bubble that I'm seeing, is at the heart, a lot of these things are commodity services. And so you could think of them like, gasoline, right? And so you have all of these startups that are like, we're going to be the next gasoline company. But the reality is like, I don't care where my gas is, right? Like, what's the cheapest? And so I really do think it is the Googles and the Microsofts, and of course the AWSs that are going to win, right? These are going to be the platforms that are going to drive it. There are a few outliers that are doing some hardware, software combos that are super performant, which may or may not matter, depending on the use case. But that's one of those cases where it's like, same thing on the hardware side. Everybody's investing in NVIDIA. They're like, oh, NVIDIA is a proxy to machine learning. Well, it's like, do you really think that Samsung and Intel and all of ARM, all of these companies are just going to be like, I guess NVIDIA is the AI company? It's like, no, of course they're going to develop their own product line. And even AWS and Google and Facebook, they're going to develop their own silicon. And so you have this huge bubble in terms of this speculation, because it's like, where can I invest in this generative AI craze? And NVIDIA is just this darling. Or you have all of these startups that are going to be destroyed by the big cloud providers. And I'm sorry to be raining on anybody's parade. I'm sure it will be different. If you're listening, you're like, no, we're going to be the next platform. I say, good on you. I hope you will be. And I wish you a happy acquisition by one of these cloud giants. But where I am very bullish on the other side, because I'm like, okay, this is totally a bubble. But where I am bullish is in the implementation. And if you can say, okay, well, I can get my Llama or my Claude or whatever algorithm, and that's one of the great things about that Nathan talked about with Bedrock. Bedrock is not a model; it lets you operate through all of these different models, and so that's a huge advantage in terms of the simplicity of implementation, but also. As these models are being improved and Llama 3 came out and Claude 3 came out, it's like, okay, they're there. I don't have to go out and find them and whatever else, or it's not hiding behind the scenes. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, just like gasoline, will it get me to where I want to go, right? Will the LLM solve my problem or not? And it's almost binary. Of course, there's some degree of like, well, we need 80% accuracy or 90% or whatever it is. But if you can get that accuracy, the question is, where can I get it the cheapest that will operate at whatever speed that I need it to operate at scale? And so that's again, I think I'm not alone in that belief of, both the hype, but then also the potential that exists for small businesses, and in particular for SaaS platforms, to integrate generative AI. And a lot of companies are doing it wrong. That's one of the other reasons not to do it yourself. So I can jump into that. I want to talk about that, but I want to get your guys' takes. Do like you agree, right? That this is, at the end of the day, it's commodity.
Yeah, 100%. We see Bedrock as a service, just like any other service, and that's how AWS wants to to portray itself as far as the capabilities that we're producing for our customers, and we want to make that as easy as possible, right? And I think that's really where Bedrock shines here, because as you said, at the end of the day, it's nothing that you couldn't do on your own, right? You could go out, you could find the LLM, you could stand up hardware, you could deploy the model, run inference against it. All of those things are true. However, you then have all of that undifferentiated heavy lifting that we like to talk about so much as solutions architects, that AWS really removes that burden, from you, so that you can just focus on the important aspects, which is really the true long-term vision, and that is the applications that come from it, right? The real world experience and capabilities that you get from generative AI.
Yeah,
so I think this is a really, sorry, go ahead,
that
Joaquin.
connection, the automation, the future and the impact of generative AI will be in automation, not human to machine, but machine to machine. I have an article I shared. I don't know how to share that out, but on LinkedIn, where I talk about that. I don't know if we can share that out with the audience.
I think that's a great lead in, actually. And we've covered pretty well, I think, why having a partner is such a good idea if you're going to be engaging in these aspects, or building SaaS for that matter as well, because I think many of the same lessons of generative AI could apply to building SaaS too. It's generally way more complicated, I think, than a lot of people give credit for.
Yeah.
But above and beyond that, then looking forward and into the future and the promise of generative AI, what do you see as the future, right? So like this article that you mentioned here.
Well, so again, I think that it's important for people to realize that optimizing their own personal flow, right? And I was talking with somebody who's super smart marketer, very technical. Now he's working at a restaurant conglomerate, and they have a bunch of restaurants that they're launching. And he was saying he was getting data from these disparate sources, because in the restaurant industry, not surprisingly, you're sort of beholden to like Yelp and OpenTable. You actually don't have control about your reservation engine. Mm-hmm. And so finding out like, okay, well, who are my recurring customers? Because there's some threshold. If you get the customers back to the restaurant a certain number of times, they're lifers, right? And they keep going it becomes a habit. And so what he did, and this is an awesome individual contribution, he downloaded all of these different data sources, created a spreadsheet, and then uploaded that spreadsheet to an LLM, where he was able to then, as he described it, have a conversation with the spreadsheet. And he was like, how many customers have gone, 2 or 3 times within such a window? And the system was like 273. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's fascinating, right? And I was talking to him, and he's actually going to be engaging with our team on a POC, because I was like, wouldn't that be great if you weren't uploading that manually, but instead you were like figuring out what are the things that you need to know, and there was a report, or there's an email being sent out, or any marketing automation is being driven based on some of these decisions. He was like, amazing. And there was like, and wouldn't it be great if AWS would pay for it? He was like, sold. So that's a perfect example of, yes, people can and should be experimenting, but especially people that are finding like there's value here. The question is then, how do you automate that? And that's really where I think that we can help as a consulting partner, whether it's individual and we're creating a brand new system with lambdas that spin up and down and go through some workflow that Nathan, I'm sure, could describe more eloquently, or is it an integration into a SaaS product? And a lot of people are doing the SaaS product integration very poorly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so much that go into it too that can be difficult to wrap your head around if you are a SaaS provider. Just the security aspects of the data that's being utilized, for instance, all these little things that come up. we have customers, for instance, that are interested in being model producers, let's say, but the models that they produce rely on customer data that does fine tuning, right, of the actual trained model based on that data. Well, where do you do that training is a question that comes up now. And if you're talking about from a SaaS perspective, do you in-house all that from the SaaS provider, right? And do all of the model training locally? Well, then you have to negotiate with your customer to get all of their data moved to you in order to do that training. Plus you have the cost that's incurred that you're taking on behalf of your customer in order to do that model fine-tuning or training. And then if you flip it on its head and go the other route, well, you have a bunch of questions there too. Okay, so in that case, yeah, the data may already exist at the customer, but now I need to get my IP, my base model into their environment and then run training with it. Well, now I've kind of relinquished control over that model to a third party. Is that a great solution? So there's so many questions that are still yet to be answered, especially when it comes to SaaS and generative AI. And these are the kinds of things that we're investigating on the SaaS Factory side to have a thought leadership view and a perspective of how these things should come about, and also what we should be doing from an AWS perspective as well to better support these kinds of questions and thoughts that come up over time. But also on this, one more quick thing, this thought of thinking about the future is another area that we're kind of focused in on here. So internally, we had this concept of, hey, let's if we were to project 5 or 10 years into the future, what is a business 5 years from now, given all this AI advancement that we're working through, what does it look like, in 5 years? What are the applications that we're building? Will they look like in 5 years? You mentioned that the agent kind of aspect of generative AI, machine to machine automation, is going to be a huge part of it. The one other area that I would say from my perspective is going to come up as well is just that general interactivity between the human and the computer, the human computer interface. And as a front end guy, this probably goes down your road too, Joaquin, but that very well could be drastically different how we interact with our computer systems in the next 5 to 10 years as well. But all of these things, of course, we're all thinking about.
Yeah, I thought smart home was gonna be it, but actually we've talked about this off camera, like, even Alexa, which huge penetration, right? But now developers starting in June are going to have to pay to host their Alexa skills because you have this massive drop off, right? In terms of people install the skill, they use it once, and then they forget it's there. So that is a huge challenge for these systems in terms of integration.
Big ROI issues in those cases.
Yeah. And I would say if we look at the time horizon, this feels very much like self-driving cars did like 7 years ago, where everybody was going to have a self-driving car. It was like, oh, I guess my daughter's not going to have to learn how to drive, And it's like, guess what? That didn't happen. And it's
not anytime soon.
Yeah. Well, we underestimated two things. We underestimated the complexity of the real world, right? The number of infinite edge cases. What do you do when a penguin walks across the road? What does an AI do when a penguin walks across the road? What does an AI do when a plastic bag blows across the road, but it looks like a baby, right? All of these questions in terms of infinite possibilities. What about if a truck carrying a bunch of, millions of clown noses explodes on the road? Like you don't know what a human's going to do, but you really don't know what the self-driving car is going to do. And we're not okay with like 99.99% chance it's not going to drive off the cliff. But maybe.
But
but maybe. And then the other thing is we underestimated the legal complexity. So people are, it's like, who gets sued when a self-driving car, kills somebody? The answer is everybody. Everybody gets sued. And so the losses also from lawsuits are potentially infinite, right? There's no like, well, we'll only lose this much ever from a lawsuit. But what's interesting and maybe more hopeful about the case for, or I don't know if I would say hopeful about generative AI, because we're talking about things that are potentially killing jobs. Hopefully they're not. Hopefully they're open new doorways. But I think we need to be honest about the moral implications of some of this. But when you talk about self-driving cars, you're talking about life and death, right? If you're talking about automating marketing collateral, the stakes are way lower, right? It's like, I didn't like that ad. It's like, well, you didn't die. You'll be fine. Like, no money was lost. And so I think we're in this place where no matter if somebody feels like they're late, they're not late, right? There's going to be plenty of time. There's going to be plenty of years over the next even 5 to 7 horizon to still do something new and interesting and innovative, in the same way that when the iPhone came out, right? Like we were like, okay, well, we've developed all the apps that could ever be. And then they keep coming, right? Because there are new business models, there's new features, there's new processing power. So I think that we're kind of in this place where people need to take a breath and say they're not late, and know that it is going to change a lot, and know that they can be part of that change. But also, we're not going to have our self-driving cars next year. Or
I think it all ties to different segments, right? Like who is providing the hardware, like the NVIDIAs and AMDs of the world, and Joaquin, like you mentioned, the LLM space there, whether it's OpenAI or Anthropic or the open source models like Hugging Face or Llama. And then I think the real development that need to happen at this moment is the applications that are built by using these large language models. And that's the space that needs to evolve. And that's when we'll actually see the day-to-day use case of how you will use large language models for your day-to-day use cases, like a Perplexity, for that example, if you're using it like a search engine, so that which is running like all the large language models for each and every query. And, how do you see that in the future with all these applications that we are using today, and how will they leverage some of that? How is it going to change with these large language models? Like, think of DoorDash, for example, right? Like, it's an application that is built on all the traditional stacks. Yes, there is machine learning that is involved, that does all the recommendations based on your prior ordering and everything. But is there real use case for these LLMs, and also the hardware devices that are built on these LLMs like Humane or RabbitMQ, which doesn't even have like a user interface? I mean, it has a user interface, but it's mostly like a query. I think it's still evolving. I don't think anybody knows the perfect answer for how it will be there in like next 2 years or 5 years, for that matter. We just have to see how it evolves, how the technology comes out.
So I have another article that I can share, which is, one of the dangers of large language models and trying to implement them into SaaS products is you guys are familiar with the paradox of choice, right? It's easier to order something at In-N-Out than it is to order something, with a menu with hundreds of items, because our little human brains were just like, too much, but at In-N-Out, you're like, I'll have a burger. Do you want fries? That's essentially the decision tree. But what's happened in poor implementations is that you kind of at this place where, when you look at raw LLMs or large language models, or more broadly artificial intelligence, you're like, anything is possible. And it's like, if you tell that to a customer, you're like, well, what can I do with it? You're like, anything is possible. That's unhelpful. Like, that's entirely unhelpful. And the same thing is true for a SaaS customer coming in and walking in. And you could imagine, like, every single SaaS product could just be a text prompt. Like, no matter what it delivers, it's just a text prompt. It's analytics, it's a text prompt. It's chat, it's a text prompt. And the problem with that, I think, is really well illustrated with the new version of Google Analytics, GA4, which they actually rolled out super early and was really early in terms of, artificial intelligence. And they were just like, they took away all of the ability for you to actually navigate through and find all of the reports that they had curated, took away all of the opinions about how somebody's going to use analytics. And they're just like, ask for what you want. And I was like, oh, wow, this is cool. Well, I'd like to know how many of my users came over from LinkedIn, and then, how many are return users? It's like, no, not like that. You have to guess the magic spell. It's just like, no, just give me a way that I can engage in. Even a word processor, right, is a call and response with the keyboard and the input that's coming up. So I hit a key, I see the letter appear on the screen. I hit a key, I see the letter. And so it's the dance that we're used to as humans and as machines actually is a call and response. And then I could go back and I could go, okay, what did I write? Like, I don't know if you guys have ever tried to do audio only, but like, it's just like, what did I write? How many grammatical errors did I introduce? Read that back to me. It's terrible, right? We need that call and response, which is why this has been so effective, right? Because it's like we have these prompts, and I like, oh, okay, I've got this thing over here. I got red bubble telling me what to do. And when you take that all away and you say anything is possible and just type what you want, you take the human and you give them no anchor, and you also take the machine and you give them no anchor, because I'm going to ask for it in really weird ways that the machine is not going to anticipate. And so where I think you actually start to get to some interesting middle ground where you could use that prompt is like chatbots, right? That's kind of interesting, but you have to watch out for the liability again, because you hear about that airline where like somebody gave away, the chatbot gave away free tickets. Like somebody was delayed and they were like, so sorry, you can have free tickets. And they were liable for that because the chatbot said they could. But you can have chatbots, you can have FAQs. And I think that's a really interesting thing. Imagine like a really large community or forum or something like that, where somebody comes in and they type something. Well, you could imagine that the LLM, when it gets that query, going like, this sounds like these adjacent things. Let me see if I can answer this. And if you get positive feedback from the user saying like, oh yeah, that was great, that totally helped me answer, you could actually fabricate a larger forum with more landing pages dynamically using this one-to-one interaction that would then be possible from that LLM, right? And if you want to really get devious, you could say, how could people start to ask for these things? And so then you create sort of this infinite landing pages to be inspired by Google, which in and of itself is going to change how we interact with computers. Like as all of this stuff proliferates into infinity, we're going to need a search on our side that is being prompted and is a large language model, because we will at some point, it's a little bit of an overstatement to say we'll have infinite data. But if we start to create things that are sort of adjacent, and you could imagine just even tax, right? Like people want to get to the truth of what is the tax rate for such and such given all of this context. The way that I think about it is sort of like this gem, right? This faceted gem where the gem is actually the truth, but the way you enter it is your question, right? And so that you have all of these facets, and what LLMs could potentially do with these data sources or repositories of information is turn that into a sphere, right? Where no matter what your entry point, you're kind of asking it, it's a weird way, it knows that that's what you're actually asking for. But it then requires us to do searches in different ways. And we're already seeing that. Google is actually losing search share to people using ChatGPT.
Yeah, there's definitely disruption there because of the generality of it, right? I mean, there's so much that can be accomplished if the right prompts are used, and maybe that's kind of one of the key aspects there. But this is all fascinating, Joaquin and Nathan. Your story with generative AI and machine learning and what you can provide to your customers is fantastic. I was wondering if maybe we could switch gears just a little bit here as we're getting a little bit further in time to maybe bring it back around to SaaS for a moment. And, we're still dealing with, certainly difficult economic climate that exists out there today. And so with this economic climate that we're in, have you noticed any changes in your customers as related to SaaS and the business models that they're implementing has there been any changes that you've noticed?
Well, yeah, I mean, in terms of the economic climate, I definitely am seeing, especially I think in the tech industry, there have been a lot of attempts to optimize, and from the cloud giants on down, and it's not just there, but you also see that in Nike, like Intel, all of these companies are optimizing their people out in the hopes that generative AI is essentially going to be there. I think as it relates to SaaS and really everybody that is not in that category of like wake me up when it's over. Back when I was doing websites, right, in 1999, there would always be the people who were like, why do I need a website? I'm in the yellow pages. And you're like, okay, like that's not a fight that we're going to win. And so there's that category of people who are just going to be dragged kicking and screaming. But everybody is thinking about it, right? I was listening to the Wall Street Journal podcast and they were talking to me about Claude and like Llama. And I was just like, in Anthropic, AI models. I'm like, whoa, like my dad's hearing that, and so it's one of those things where everybody's thinking about it. There's not
it's in that general public zeitgeist at this point, right? It's there.
And I think it's really important for not just big businesses, but for small businesses to realize that this has been democratized, and over the next 5 to 7 years, we will continue to see this proliferation of bespoke solutions, right, which are very cost effective in terms of how they can solve business problems, or optimizing back office things, or things are possible that weren't possible before, in the same way that things became possible with multi-touch living in our hand that literally were not possible before. And we don't have the ability to see right now where that's going to lead to, but I do think that it will be similar in terms of impact. I mean, people have said generative AI is going to be like the internet, and it's like maybe, but it's certainly, I think, will approach the level of transformation that we have right now. I mean, can you imagine if we turned off all the phones? Like that's, and I think that we will approach that level of integration or search engine.
Integration and dependency.
Yeah. No, for real. But getting back to your question about SaaS, or the prompt about SaaS, because this is, really, what's some advice that we can give to SaaS providers? One, work with a consultancy. Like, don't try and go it your own. Work with the solutions architect, because even if you've got some ideas, there's no reason not to explore those ideas. And AWS wants to get you using those services. So it's free money. The other really important thing, and I have a blog post that I wrote on LinkedIn about this, is people, number one rule, have an opinion about how your users should behave. Don't take the lazy way out. Don't take the Google, we're just going to guess and people will, type in what they want and we'll magically have it appear. That's not real, right? And the number two rule, provide visual cues. So as you're integrating your machine learning Gen AI solutions, make sure that you have some sort of an indicator of how somebody can access that. Maybe it's a button, maybe it's a click, whatever, but don't hide it in a search box that's blank. And then use Gen AI to enhance existing data. That's a huge opportunity that exists. And then use Gen AI to simplify complex inputs, right? So if you're thinking about, for example, like text inputs, and you're like, okay, you're on a dating site and you need to write a bio, right? It's just give me a default bio that I can be like, okay, I'm going to edit that and click that, rather than saying, force me to write all this stuff out. And you see it sort of creeping in, like on LinkedIn, like people like push the Gen AI button to,
yes, I've seen that,
to write it or to edit it. I kind of feel like I don't want to push the button, but if you just showed me some default text, I might be more interested in engaging in that. Or, I'd be like, okay, well, edit that because that's not quite right. But people are trying to figure that out. And so I think that's better than, trying to, not have it, or just it be like you have to guess what's possible.
And going back to the SaaS question there, it's, in the last 3 or 4 years, there's people would come to us and like, we want a SaaS product. And you're like, how are you going to market this and build it? And they're like, we don't know. It'll come around when we get to it. And in the last year, they're like, well, that's like a nice feature we could add. How do we market that? And they're really doing the total cost of ownership evaluation up front now. because, you know, people have realized tech isn't just a blank check. I can build something cool and eventually it makes money. You actually have to build something that's worth it. And so working with someone or learning how to do those total cost of ownerships as you're building these features on Amazon, because the pricing can be kind of complicated if you don't know what you're looking at, is a great advantage to talking to a partner.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point that you brought up, Nathan. Like how SaaS Factory and AWS actually define SaaS, right? Like we call it a business model. We never call it like a technology model. So it's all about what are the business objectives that you're trying to achieve with your SaaS application. And yes, you will use technology to solve some of those goals or to reach some of those goals. But at the end of the day, SaaS is a business model. So, and it all lies on like, you want to have like agility and you want to respond to like market dynamics quickly, right? And what is the operational efficiency that you get? And for instance, like when COVID hit, like when you're on the cloud and if you're running a SaaS business and if it doesn't have like the same amount of load prior COVID, and you can optimize your SaaS application really quickly and reduce your cloud costs as well. So that's where the agility and all of this comes into play, and not just for implementing new features. That is one thing. Yeah, you always have to innovate and develop new features and functionalities for your customers. And also it comes to like the operational efficiency, and what you need to have like a frictionless onboarding if you want to really grow and scale your SaaS businesses. And I think there are a lot of moving parts with a SaaS application, and that's where like the expertise of a SaaS competency partner really helps the customers and for them to like grow and build and scale their SaaS businesses on AWS.
Yeah. One of our most popular offerings recently is it's a 6-point inspection. It's kind of like a well-architected review light, where we come in and we look at what you have on your platform, being it a SaaS or something else, and we evaluate security and cost and reliability and all those pillars you have in the well-architected review. And we come back with a recommendation of how to optimize those. And then we can go from there on what we do with it. But we've got a lot of interest in that because people are looking to optimize their agility and their costs.
And we can potentially help our customers pay for it as well. That's part of it.
The dark side of infinite scalability is infinite cost scaling too. Like if you leave the water running on AWS or on any platform, it's bad news. Like I've done electrical work around my house, and like I'm like, I'm too lazy to turn the electricity off. So I get shocked, and then I'm like, I'm gonna finish it. Like that's not, you don't want me doing the electrical on your house, right? And I think that it's really important to like billing monitoring. I mean, that's one of the things that we go through. And Nathan, like you've seen a ton of that stuff over time of like systems that are just running that are not bringing any value. They've just been running and nobody is paying attention.
Yeah, we at least 4 or 5 audits a quarter like that. We got one we hopped in a couple of years ago. I'm like, yeah, cool. Like, what are all these systems doing? And they're like, we don't know. We just don't touch them. And I'm like, they literally have no network traffic or anything, so nothing's using them. I say, shut them off. What happens? Did anything break? No. Great. Let's leave them off. And so evaluating that. The other one I see a lot is like
it's a zombie server.
I love CloudWatch Logs. It's one of the best centralizing tools out there because it's already in Amazon. No data export costs. But the other problem is a lot of the defaults are never remove my logs, which you may need, but you probably don't. And setting those expiration dates can save you hundreds or thousands of dollars a month just by like, change these all to 3 months.
Yeah.
And free up money for your Gen AI expenditures. If you're in IT, you don't have to let that spend go, but just use it for something that's going to be more advantageous.
You've already allocated the capital. We'll just reassign it.
100%. That's actually, that was Microsoft's whole play. That's how they got to number 2. They were like, you're spending all this on Office. You want to do cloud instead? And we saw that, many, many times over the years in the instance. It was never, in my experience, it was never hey, Azure is better technology. They were just like, I got Microsoft bucks. And so, reallocating that money is a very smart move for any IT person who's watching.
So as we've talked a lot about competency partners, the role that you can play, how you can help customers. And you've talked about startups and SMBs kind of being a really good target focus for you guys. But if we have customers that are out there today that are watching, or that maybe Rupesh and I interact with, and we're broaching the subject of going with a partner or seeing if they could work with a partner, what are some of the things that these customers should be considering when they're evaluating, especially with partners around building SaaS and working within the ecosystem of AWS?
Well, the first thing I look at for a SaaS partner is that they have the Metal Toad logo, because they are the best. Otherwise, it would be their references. Everyone's marketplace page has references from customers from their partner page. It has their offerings there. It has reviews. So look there, and then go look at their website. Any good partner has not just a page focused on Amazon, because that's there, but they have good case studies. And you want case studies that align with not only your market, but your industry, so that they understand what you're working on. And you don't have to educate them on farming before you can get started.
Yeah, not all partners are the same, right? Not all partners are specialized in the same areas or focus on the same verticals, or the vertical that you may be in, or a specific area or technology. So we love all of our partners. I like to say equally, but certainly there are partners that are more aligned with specific customer needs and wants, and it kind of starts with the customer, right, and working backwards from them, but then aligning yourself if you're out there looking to a partner that matches you.
Yeah, my advice is actually a little bit different, because I think that the same advice applies whether you're looking for like an auto mechanic, or you're looking for an electrician or something like that. I think people really ask for a referral, ask for a reference, because there's nothing quite like that. And so anybody that the AWS solutions architect team or the sales team is going to refer, like they're doing that because they've seen these things succeed in the past, and they want to be sure their customer is taken care of. I would say the other thing is trust your gut. I think it's really important, like we kind of assume when we go to an auto mechanic, like, yeah, they know how to fix cars, right? But the question is, do they feel honest? Are they disclosing things? Are they being collaborative? Are they being patient? Are they taking the time to have the conversation, really trying to understand what I'm trying to do? And so I think that people may not know the specific skill, but I think that they can get a really good sense of, is this a good person? Is this somebody that is representing, themselves honestly? Or is this somebody who's just trying to get my money? And I think that it's really important to trust your gut. And then also, along with that, trusting your gut, pick somebody that when or if things go wrong, you're going to be cool with them, right? They're going to be cool. You're going to be cool, because, these projects, they're not like taking your car in for an oil change, right? It's really like, hey, I want to rebuild my house from the ground up, or I want to, add a bathroom to my house. And anybody who's ever done a construction project knows they're always late. They're always over budget. And if they have a bad experience, they didn't know about any of that, and there was no communication, and the person's rude and all of that. And so I think that looking for really good communication skills is also one of the things that I would recommend looking for in any vendor, whether they're a house or they're doing cloud or whatever, working on your car, cleaning your aquarium. You want somebody who is going to be communicative. And yes, we can assume, I think, a certain amount of competency, but also you want to be sure that they're competent, right? That's kind of table stakes, but that generally comes if you get a good gut feeling from somebody, you can do a pretty good job.
Yeah, very solid advice. Agree wholeheartedly. So, well, let's see. Doing a quick time check here. Olabanji, I don't know where we are. We've been so engrossed in this conversation, but I think things are going well here. I think maybe we could probably start going to maybe some parting questions or closing questions here. Rupesh, I don't know if you have any others for our folks at Metal Toad.
Yeah, if customers wants to meet Metal Toad at any SaaS events or how do they reach out to your team? Are you guys conducting like any hackathons or any events specific to SaaS or in general where people can attend and learn more about Metal Toad or even participate in those events? Anything coming up?
Yeah, we'll be at a couple of events. I don't know the details. Joaquin can go that in a second, but we do have a webinar next Tuesday. It's going to be going over one of the products or solutions built during our last hackathon in March, where a team built a chat bot in about 2 days. And so it'll be a really great experience there.
Fun.
Yeah, our director of accounts is going to be out in Nashville at the ISV Adopt a Partner program. I'm going to be at the AWS Web Summit on May 22nd, I believe, in Los Angeles. And so those are some of the things that are coming up right now. But also, they can find us, either if they want to email us, they can just send an email to hello@MetalToad, and that will be routed to somebody who would be happy to help. That's our mission, right? We've been doing technology for a really long time. And so our mission, it's a little odd for a tech company, but our mission, we talk about it every Monday, is to help people. We have our core values that we go through. I spend a lot of time talking about the values as a CEO, but respect, curiosity, desire to help. And so happy to help. That's really what we like to do.
Is there anything? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead, Anthony.
I was just gonna say if I was gonna maybe open up the floor here as well as we're kind of winding down as well. Is there anything from the Metal Toad side that you'd like to leave with the audience as we're wrapping up today?
Oh gosh.
Well, put you on the spot now, didn't I?
Yeah, no. Well, it's like it's know your audience, right? Know who's here, and I'm trying to go through the catalog of what we've been talking about to see like who would still be here, like who's paying attention. Well, first of all, shout out to anybody from the Metal Toad team who's streaming. Hey, everybody, great to see you. Happy that you're here. And then I think that I'm also just super proud of the people that we've also been interacting with on the AWS side. It's been an amazing ride with the SaaS competency, with the machine learning competency. I think that if there are any people who are interested in being an AWS partner or exploring some of those competencies, we could certainly talk about what our experience has been like, on a more of a one-to-one basis. But the thing that everybody knows about AWS certifications and also the competencies is they're really tough, right? They're hard. I think they're the hardest in all of the cloud environments, which makes them very meaningful. And so AWS has always been our choice in terms of technology. As soon as we went into the cloud, and I ask, right, and people that on the engineering team say, it's the best tech. And I think that consistently that's been the case. I think that AWS is doing the right moves. And they had to move very fast in terms of generative AI because it came out so fast. But, we've looked at a lot of the different platforms out there. We've looked at ChatGPT, we've looked at Bedrock, and these things, having gone through and run multiple projects against them, a lot of them are commodity offerings. So nobody in the AWS ecosystem needs to move away or has to plug into ChatGPT or any of these other systems. There is a lot of diversity inside of Bedrock. There are a lot of generative AI tools. And if anybody has any questions about should it be machine learning? Should it be generative AI? Our whole ethos is we're happy to help. And that's we're happy to help. We help with technology. So any of those questions that we can answer for anybody, we're happy to answer and explore them. And then the other thing is definitely take advantage of the proof of concept funding. If you have an idea, test it, right? Find out how much it's going to cost to operate. There's no obligation there. And that's something that, if you send an email to hello@MetalToad and say, hey, I want to explore this. Is it crazy? Let's talk.
Thank you for that, Joaquin. I wanted to bring to the attention of the listeners. There's a survey in the chat. Please make sure to fill out the survey. Tell us how we have done today. If there's any way we can do better, please be sure to put that in as well. And I just want to quickly circle back on something you mentioned earlier in the show about Secure Toad. I said, well, we're going to talk about it. I don't know if you have already talked about it or maybe I missed it, but if you could just, quickly give us a summary of its use cases and, yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Secure
Well,
Toad.
you go ahead, Nathan. You're the one.
Secure Toad is a security program. It's completely built on Amazon, and the whole idea behind it is there are numerous threats out there to any website or web application. And so what it does is it will ingest your CloudFront logs. It will put them through our machine learning algorithm, and it will score them. And then based on the score, you can select the criticality you want to block, and it will just go back out to your web application firewall in CloudFront, and it will auto block it for you. And so we have some instructions on how you can do that with different settings there, but the whole idea is it's seamless, it's adaptive, it's going to learn what people's traffic patterns are and detect those really, really odd ones and block them. When we were first testing this out, we noticed, it caught the really obvious ones of people trying to do SQL injections or log into a WordPress site for a non-WordPress. But it was also identifying our clients' white hat vendors who are just going around doing mock attacks. And
Nice.
So the fact that it's catching these is amazing, and we were super excited about it, and that's why we do it. And it's running on metaltoad.com right now.
Great.
Yes.
When you talk
How
about
can customers find it? Are you on
It's
Marketplace?
on the Marketplace. You should be able to search for Secure Toad, and or you can go to Metaltoad. You can see all of our consulting offers there, and it is the SaaS product there listed as well.
You talked about CloudFront, right? What if you have customers who do not use CDNs, just basic traffic? Is it also applicable to them?
Right now, it's just CloudFront. We have a roadmap in to start ingesting from application load balancers as well, because the log formats are very similar. It's just a matter of making sure we have the right hooks to get the logs in there. And then if you had a WAF attached to that, we could also auto block. And after that, we can expand based on feedback we're getting from clients and where they'd like to go next.
All right. Thanks.
Very nice.
The idea is to keep it also really simple, right? If somebody's like, I want multiple panes of glass or a single pane of glass, and I want to be able to, hack the mainframe, this is not the product for them. If somebody's like, man, I wish I didn't have to worry about people, hacking, my web properties, this is great because you've got essentially robots that are policing and just looking for these bad actors, bad traffic. And we've created an interface that allows you to do whitelisting. I'm not supposed to say, what's the phrase? Anyway, the good listing and then the bad listing in terms of the IP blocking. And so you can send simple email invite, and then that keys off the IP and automatically just sort of says, okay, well, this is a friendly, right? So if you have an administrator for your content management system or something along those lines, we make it very easy to integrate in a way that's kind of transparent. And if you want to, you can sort of log in and look at your graph of all of these threats that are showing up and what's happening. But it's really just want a low, medium, or high sort of patrol being done by the AI, and that's essentially the gist of it.
I think last question for me, and I think you were trying to talk about whitelisting IP addresses. Do you have like a training content or like a workshop that anybody that wants to learn more about Secure Toad that they could use? That's something that's like limited but free to some extent that they could just practice on, work around with and stuff like that.
We will very soon.
That's an excellent suggestion. We will shortly.
Wait, hold on. Yes, give us a few weeks, but that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, it just helps people that wants to learn more about Secure Toad to just get their hands dirty, work with it and see how good it is, and that could also.
There is a 30-day free trial, so if you'd like to just try it out, go for it. It doesn't block anything unless you scroll that dial at the top. So give it a try. Just see what you like it. No obligation.
Great.
Very nice.
Rupesh, Anthony, any questions?
I would just like to, kind of say from the SaaS Factory team and also from the SaaS competency perspective and team members, thank you to Metal Toad, Nathan and Joaquin for being here today and speaking to us and speaking to the larger audience as well. I'm not sure if my internet is still working, so I apologize if I'm breaking up on you guys, but
Very good.
Totally there,
so
Anthony.
definitely just wanted to say a great big thanks that we're really proud to have you as competency partners.
Oh, thank you so much. It's great to be here. My apologies for talking so much. You hit on a couple.
That's what we're here for, is to hear from everybody. Wants to hear from you, not from me.
Well, yeah, but you want to hear from the real doctor, not the TV doctor. I always tell people you don't want me operating on patients, but you can if you wanted to hear more from Nathan. If you send an email to hello@metaltoad. He's one of the people that is in that sales engineering team, so you could ask your questions directly of him, and he has a ton of answers along with the other sales engineers. They're fantastic. The one thing I will say about Metal Toad we've always gotten high marks for is the people, right? It's just a fantastic group of people, and I think Anthony and Rupesh, you've had a chance to interact with the team. There's nobody that I interact with on a day-to-day basis where I'm like, they're talented, but they're not very nice. Like, everyone's nice, and that's kind of remarkable in a tech company.
I'll add on to that. We mentioned here, don't go into it alone, and you should always work with a partner if you can. But if you need to do it in house, always reach out to the SaaS Factory team. They were amazing to work with. I thought I knew it all when it came to SaaS because we built so many. But when we were building our own, we learned a lot, and they were there and very supportive and like, oh, have you considered this? And I'm like, no, let's go look at that. So thank you to the SaaS Factory for leading us there, and always reach out to them if not a partner.
Wow,
And
absolutely.
one quick closing comments for all the customers that are looking at this show today. If you are running an application on AWS, and if you really don't know if whether you want to be like a SaaS application or not, we do have some funding programs that are exclusively available for competency partners. So reach out to partners like Metal Toad or your account manager or account SAs to see whether that funding is applicable. If it is applicable for your account, then the competency partners will deliver a workshop for you at no cost, showing you what it takes for you to actually be a SaaS application. And then there are also like other programs that are available exclusively to our partners, especially the competency partners, who can help you build and scale your SaaS businesses here on AWS. And you can take advantage of all those programs. And one last thing, this is a 3-part series of SaaS episodes, and this is the first episode that we are having with our competency partners. So be on lookout for 2 more episodes that are coming down the pipeline in the next coming months.
Yeah, we have the next one on July 10th, I believe is the date, and then the final one for us will be on October 2nd, so spread out throughout the year.
Great. We're looking forward to those.
So much.
All
And
right.
thank you so much, Olabanji, for hosting today. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you very much for staying here with me, and thank you to the team from Metal Toad. I really I enjoyed the time here. I learned about Secure Toad. I'm more of a networking guy, so when Nathan mentioned CDN and WAF, it kind of got me excited a little bit. So I definitely will be looking into that. But once again, thank you guys for coming. And with that, we have come to the end of today's stream. Thank you all to the listeners out there. We really appreciate your time and hope to catch you next time. Thank you all. Bye.
See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.